Sabres lose in Calgary. We'll talk about it. And also, I've discovered a very bad trait that the Buffalo Sabres have displayed this season. That's coming up today on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody, and welcome into this Friday edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast. And thanks for making us your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. That includes checking us out on our YouTube channel where you can watch the show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode presented by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Sneaky Joe DiBiase on today's show. A reminder, if you would like to hit us up during the day, you got a question, you want to know about the lines, you want to know some stats, you want to converse about some trade stuff, you can hit us up, joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres. You can sign up for our Locked On Sabres text club there. Lot to get to on today's show. There is a fatal flaw of the Buffalo Sabres that will not surprise anybody, but I've got some numbers to put behind that. The Sabres scoring first, which they've done a lot, and their inability to hold leads, merging those two things together, and really how many points they've left on the board in the standings with those two traits this year. So we'll get to that coming up on today's show. We will also get to Sabres and Flames, the loss last night. The Sabres will be in Edmonton tomorrow. A little bit of an afternoon game. Football clear the way because college football is over. And now that we're into Championship Sunday for the NFL, you got no competition. If you want to watch the Sabres and you have to pick between that and football, well, you won't have to do that tomorrow because only Sundays now. Only 2 more Sundays of football, and then it is all hockey all the time if you are a sports fan here locally in Buffalo. I saw is a anniversary, kind of an anniversary. It's not like really a super famous day in Sabre history by any means, but I saw the On This Day in Buffalo Sports History Twitter account tweeting out the highlight of Jack Eichel against Nashville in overtime. 2017 was 8 years ago today. And why am I bringing that up? Because I remember the day after that goal, and it was a declaration of, okay, we've had this with this most recent group too. I think there have really been 2, maybe 3 moments where we thought, all right, this is the group that's going to figure it out. I think 2 years ago, we had that feeling when they missed by 1 point. During the 10-game win streak, we probably had that same feeling. And at least me personally, I remember after that game thinking that because Eichel had carried them, was so good. The overtime goal was coast to coast. He cut in and ripped it by the goaltender. It was an amazing goal. And that pulled the Sabres, I looked up, to within 5 points of the playoffs. So for me, that was a little, all right, maybe they won't make it this year, but like, look at this guy. Look how good he is. They're going to get there. And they haven't. They haven't. And he's gone. So that's kind of how history goes. And we don't have to get into all the reasons why on today's show, at least. Let's get to what happened last night. The Sabres fall to the Calgary Flames. And it's just another one of these games. It'll actually kind of go with the theme, half the theme of today's show, which half of is the Sabres' inability to hold leads this season. They've been excruciatingly bad at it all year long. And this wasn't a lead. I mean, they did have one for a whole 3 minutes and 13 seconds. That's another thing that's been happening recently is the Sabres will score a goal and almost immediately will give one up to the other team. And that can often be something that is said. Like way too often in NHL history and in Sabre history, fans will go, they always seem to give up a goal right after they score one. And a lot of times it's not actually true. It just happens a couple of times and you remember it, so it feels like it's true. This year, it's actually true. Like the numbers back up that they are often giving up goals immediately after they score one. So Thompson got his 22nd of the year in the second period. Really nice goal by him. He continues to score because he's the one guy that scores goals on this team. And Kadri scores one of the softest goals of the year 3 minutes later. And that's the type of goal that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen has been allowing this season that he was not allowing last season. I mean, this one takes the cake. I mean, this was backhand, softy, hits him in the blocker, goes up in the air, he's scrambling, he's twisting around, he doesn't know where the puck is, and it dribbles into the net. I mean, that's a brutal goal. Super soft goal that Luukkonen gives up that allowed it to be a tie game. And that didn't take Calgary long to take the lead. 3 minutes into the third period. And then it's 2 empty net goals. And it looks worse than it is because of the 2 empty net goals. But Sabres are also giving up a lot of empty net goals this year. One of the highest rates in the league. So, what's there to say about this game? It's just another Sabre game where they don't look super impressive. They did outshoot the Flames in this game. They did, I think, control play. I thought they had more of the play in the Calgary end than in the Sabre end, and the numbers back that up. But it's just I can't really draw too much emotion from that game because it's Calgary. It's a late game. Yeah, okay, great. You played well. The outscoring chances, everything in this game. Shot attempts, 77 for the Sabres, 55 for Calgary. Shots, 34-26, as we mentioned. Scoring chances were 37-33 in favor of the Sabres. The expected goals in this game, actually, interestingly, this would kind of speak to the Flames. Their high danger chances were higher. Where they got their opportunities, that was higher than the Sabres did. And also the amount of penalties that were taken in this game, well, then really that should have gone the other way because the Sabres had 6 power play opportunities. It did not score on any of them. That's another reason for the loss on this night is they didn't score on the power play. Calgary goes 0 for 2. Expected goals on the night were 5.5 for Calgary, 3.6 for the Sabres. It's actually a little surprising to me given the rest of the numbers, but it's where it ended up. Calgary wins 5-2. They get the win. And if you're looking at the standings right now, the Sabres are still last place in the conference. And they're not making up ground. They're not even coming close to making up ground. They're losing ground as time goes on. They are now 12 points out of a playoff spot that is currently occupied by the Blue Jackets. They're 4 points back of the New York Islanders for second last in the East, and they're 7 points back of third last. I mean, there's a race in the East. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams in the wild card race, all separated by 5 points or fewer. 8 teams. And the Sabres have found themselves not being one of them. And it's really embarrassing. Really, really, really embarrassing that they've had this season, the way it's gone. Now, anything else? Matthias Samuelsson scores in this game and adds an assist, kind of rarity for him. I don't know. Like, if you look at some of the lines we had been talking about recently about how they had a top line the other night. Kulich centering Thompson and Peterka had looked really good in this game. And they get the goal by Tage Thompson on the night. But if you look at the rest of it, that line as a whole goes for 10 minutes and 33 seconds. They only score, shot attempts were 11-10 Sabres, so they barely won that battle. Scoring chances 7-5. Like, all right, you slightly outplayed the opponent. But in terms of other lines on the night, they were not the best line. The best line on the night was Peyton Krebs, Jack Quinn, and Zach Benson. And Zach Benson's advanced numbers continue to look unbelievable. Everything. He's like top of the team in the last month. 10-21 of ice time for Krebs, Benson, and Quinn. I've liked that line for 2 games now. They outscoring shot attempts were 19-8 in favor of that line. Shots were 10-5. It's really good. Scoring chances were 9-3. So best line on the night for the Sabres goes to Krebs, Benson, and Quinn. When we come back, the Sabres have a pretty amazing stat on the season when it comes to scoring first and holding leads. A couple of stats coming up for you to kind of put this season into context and the problems that have occurred when we come back here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Sabres is presented by Gametime. I love going to live events. Sad that there's no more football games here locally, but hey, maybe you want to make the drive up to Kansas City, or maybe you want to even check out the big game down in Louisiana. I love going to live events, sports, music, theater, comedy, all great. Now Gametime's made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite live events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This feature filters out all the fluff, shows you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, like I said, I was looking for tickets to an upcoming game, and I was looking to go to a basketball game that within driving distance, and all the best deals that I found were on Gametime. All the best views that I could find and what I was going to be looking at, clarity-wise, user-friendly-wise, Gametime was the place to be. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, the Sabres fall in Calgary 5-2. Next up, Edmonton, 4 o'clock on Saturday. Here is a couple of amazing stats on the Buffalo Sabres. The Sabres on the year are actually doing something well that they did not do well last year, or even a little bit the year before, but mostly last year. One of the biggest problems about this team last year that Don Granato never really figured out was why they got off to such slow starts. They got off to painfully slow starts all last year. Last year, they scored first in 36 of their 82 games. Very bad mark. One of the lowest marks in the NHL. And Granato would often talk about, and he would even do this before it was a problem 2 years ago, talk about the importance of getting on the board early, and he always had numbers to back that up, that like a team that scores first wins a certain percentage of the time. And he was right. Most teams, in fact, this year, all but 3 teams have a winning record when they score first, and a lot of teams, it's above 75% win percentage, sometimes even higher. So most teams are great when they score first. It just comes down to how often do you do it? And last year, they didn't do it very often at all. Here's the amazing thing about this Buffalo Sabres season. They are doing it often. They're doing it very often. The Buffalo Sabres this year, I just mentioned, last year scored first 36 times. This year already, in 48 games, they have scored first 30 times. That's the second most in hockey. Let me say that again, because it's a pretty damning stat. The Sabres this year, a team that is dead last in the Eastern Conference, have scored first the second most times in the NHL. Only Columbus, who currently occupies that playoff spot in the East, has scored first more often than the Sabres have. Incredible, right? And you might be asking, or maybe you're not because you watch the games and you can see what happens in third periods. You might be asking, if you don't, how do they have such a bad record? The Sabres have only won 14 of the 30 games that they've scored first in. That is the second lowest win percentage when scoring first in the NHL. Only Chicago is worse. And as I mentioned, there are only 3 teams in hockey who have a losing record when they score first. The Sabres are one of the 3. And that goes to their goal differential by period. The Sabres on the year in the first period are a plus 17 goal differential. In first periods alone, they are 17 goals better than their opponent. That is the third best in the NHL. In the second period, they are minus 16, dead last. The worst second period team in hockey. In the third period, they're minus 19, third last, 30th in the NHL. Third best first period team, dead last, worst second period team, third worst third period team. They're a one period hockey team, and it's almost always the first period. And what's amazing to me is last year they were so bad at it, and there are a lot of the same players. So why? Why? And I'm actually asking, I've thought about this, getting ready for the show, sitting here thinking about, like, what on earth is the reason for this? Why on earth were they so painfully bad at starting games last year, and this year they're so good at it? And I really don't have a good explanation other than Lindy hyper focusing on it, knowing it was a problem coming in, and maybe pouring too much attention on it. Or maybe, again, I'm just kind of speculating here. Do they go all out early on and they gas out by the second and third period, and then they just shrivel up? And it's a mental thing, and maybe it's also an energy thing. Maybe they go too hard in the first period. Like, again, I'm working to find an explanation. It also could just be randomness. I recognize that because it's hockey. A lot of random events do occur over the course of a full season. Maybe that's all it is. It's just strange. It's very, very strange that the Sabres have leads like that so often, and they just can't capitalize on it. A little bit more on the third period stuff when we come back. Why they're so bad in the third, why they're so bad at holding leads, and whether it's a fatal flaw of the groups, not just this season, but of the group long term. We'll get a little bit more on that when we come back here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Hey, FanDuel, if you want to look at some of these tendencies on the year, betting the Sabres to score first, and maybe you parlay that with they lose the game. You know, this isn't often the best way to do it in betting, but if you had been doing that all year, you'd be probably pretty far ahead. In fact, you would absolutely be, because the Sabres have done it so often. Whether it's the first whistle, the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300. Keep the action going. The FanDuel app is super easy to navigate. There's a variety of bets, keeping every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com, join today, get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Wrapping things up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We went through the numbers there. Sabres are the third best first period team in the league this year. They're the worst second period team, and they are the third worst third period team. Now, tried to explain a little bit why are they so good in the first. Not really there's a great explanation. I think it's easier to explain why they're so bad in the second and in the third. And I think it's a combination of a mental problem and a roster build problem. I think that the Sabres right now, and I'm not one to often make this point, their best players are just not very good defensively. And I think one big problem the Sabres have had as an organization in the last decade, when they've missed all the playoffs in all these seasons, is whenever they have a problem, their solution often is not to go get a great player that solves their problem. It's to go get, minor role players to fix that problem. You could go all the way back to when Lucic ran over Ryan Miller, right? When Lucic ran over Ryan Miller, the Sabres, Darcy Regier said, well, I got to fix that. I got to get tougher. So what did he do? He got John Scott to play 2 minutes a night and be a nuclear deterrent on the bench. He traded for Steve Ott, a third liner. He traded for two bottom six guys, one who was hardly a hockey player at the time. And he said, oh, they'll do it. I'm tougher now. Didn't do anything at the top of the roster, right? I mean, Florida, I like Florida as an example here, because when they realized they had a toughness problem a couple of years ago and a defensive problem, who did they trade for? Who did they go get? Matthew Tkachuk, not a third liner, not a fourth liner, a top liner that changes the core value of your team. The Sabres went out and got third, fourth liners. Okay, well, what did they do this go round? And there are more examples in the in-between. But what did they do this go round? They, 2 years ago, were the best scoring team, one of the best scoring teams in hockey, and realized, well, we're really bad defensively. We're really bad defensively. So, how do we get better at that? And what was their solution? Yeah, let's bring in, especially this year, let's bring in Beck Malenstein. Who? Fourth liner from the Capitals. Oh, okay, sweet. He's going to play 9 minutes. Sam Lafferty, fourth liner from the Pittsburgh Penguins. Awesome. Great. Let's bring in Nicholas Aube-Kubel, fourth liner from the Capitals. Let's go trade our best prospect for Ryan McLeod. And I'm not being too snarky on McLeod. I've liked McLeod this year, and I think he's better than a fourth liner, but he's still a third liner. He's a third line center. Whenever the Sabres have a problem, their fix is to make the depth players different. It's never to add at the top of the lineup. Almost ever. Except for like 1 year, like a 16-month period when Tim Murray was the GM, did they do that. And that was it. So when I look at their roster and their problem right now holding leads, and I don't have a problem with Dylan Cousins being on the hockey team, but he's just in a role that he shouldn't be in. Dylan Cousins, for like the fourth year in a row, is not the defensive player that you think he is. There are turnovers, there are lapses, there are mistakes in his own end. My goodness, evolving hockey this year, his goals above replacement for even strength defense is in the 4th percentile. He's one of the worst defensive forwards in hockey, according to goals above replacement at evolving hockey. Horrible. Tage Thompson is better, and he is actually somebody that I have liked defensively in the past couple of years, but he's like the best he got. He's in the 48th percentile, and last year I think he was better than that. Let me check his number last year on that number when looking at his even strength defense. He was in the, amongst forwards, it's pulling up loading right now, 60th percentile. All right, Thompson's not bad, right? But Cousins ain't it. What about JJ Peterka? JJ Peterka plays at the top of the lineup, right? And he's someone that sometimes is out there late in games. He's in the 16th percentile defensively. Not good enough. Jack Quinn, who often plays in the Sabres' top 6. What is he defensively? 33rd percentile. See what I mean? Like, there's a trend here. A lot of their important players stink defensively. And okay, you moved on from Jeff Skinner. Alex Tuck, by the way, also 33rd percentile. Not as good as you would think. He does force some goals on, forechecking. But overall, not that good. And some of this is related to the team you're on and the collective. But all in all, I just think the Sabres, they just don't know how to react to their own problems. And this has been a problem for a decade. When they have an issue, they think they're going to patch it up in the bottom 6. And they need to get on a different mindset. And they need to bring in top players that then push your current top players into one role lower. And that's how you make the fix. That's how you do it. And you could say they're incapable of doing it. You could say they don't have the ability to do it because of the state of the organization. And I would say that's all true. And I would say that they've put themselves in this position. So why can't they hold leads? Pretty simple. Their great players aren't good defenders. That's it. And I am not advocating getting rid of the great players. I'm advocating bringing in guys above the great players that could push, their great players into a lesser role. That's what I would do. Be hard to accomplish. I don't know who the name is out there right now. We've talked about JT Miller. I don't know that there is a name right now, and that's part of the problem that I know doesn't make it easy. But we talked about, Ricard Raquel the other day as a potential option from the Pittsburgh Penguins. His goals above replacement defensively is in the 96th percentile. 96th percentile. All right, that guy. Maybe that's the guy. Maybe that's the guy that would make this work. Last year, he was in the 54th. Year before that, 17th. Okay, well, maybe that's a down year. Maybe there's a couple of those. And I don't want to get hung up all in one number. Raquel's a fine defender. He's not a Selke winner. This year, it's definitely inflated. I don't want to get all hung up on one goals above replacement number, but Cousins is not a good defender. Quinn is not a good defender. Peterka is not a good defender. Tuck is an incomplete defender. Just, they don't have They don't have Chris Drury. All in all, it all comes back to me that they just don't have a Chris Drury. That is literally just what they need. They need a carbon copy. He can be the defensive fix they need. He can be the leadership fix they need, the mature fix they need. Where is modern day Chris Drury? And how do I get him? That's the search if I'm the Sabres right now. All right, that'll do it for us, the Sabres and the Oilers. It is a Jeff Skinner revenge game. Maybe. He's been a healthy scratch often. Although he had been playing in the last couple of nights. He played last night. He has not scored a goal in a while. He's got 7 goals, 8 assists on the year. It's not his fault, in my opinion. I think his coach doesn't know what he is. A lot of hockey people don't know what he is or seem to pretend they want him to work hard and be a fourth liner. He's an opportunistic goal scorer that you need to put with a legitimate center. If you don't do that, the Oilers haven't done that this year. He's been on the third, fourth line all year. He's not going to score for you. So, Chris Knobloch, the Oilers coach, he's played so few minutes with McDavid and Draisaitl and Nugent Hopkins. It was never going to work. It was never, ever, ever going to work. And that's fine. Just don't sign him then. Don't blame Jeff Skinner. He's been the same player his entire career. All right. And he might not play in the playoffs this year now because of it. That'll do for us. Get out of here. Go Bills. Go Bills. Go Bills. Hopefully they win on Sunday. And we could keep focusing on some football, and this could be more of a distraction for you. That'll do for us today in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Check out Joe Marino, Locked On Bills, previewing the AFC Championship game, and we will talk to you on Monday, hopefully with one of the two teams going to the Super Bowl. That'll do for us on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.